Policy and Strategic Studies have completed their study on population and human capital development. Now, the one-year study was supported by the Development Research and Project Center under the Partnership for Advocacy in Child and Family Health at Scale. The graduation ceremony for the Senior Executive Course 42 comes up this Saturday.
And so, with us to discuss this further is Professor Deng Peng Cha, Director of Research, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPS. Also there in the studio is Dr. Nasiruddin Usman, MNI, Acting Director of Studies, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPS. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let's quickly find out from you the highlights of the presentation and recommendations you had to present, to the president, of course, when you had your parley with him.
Okay, thank you very much for having us on this program. Just like you've mentioned in the introduction, the challenge given by Mr. President to the Senior Executive Course 42 is to conduct research on the challenge of population growth and to see how we can up our human capital development to address our burgeoning population. Last week, the participants of the course submitted the findings to Mr. President. One of the key findings we made in this research is that the country is facing demographic crisis. And what we mean by this, when you have a population that is growing at a very fast rate and you don't have appropriate human capital development to absorb the growth, then you have crisis. And therefore, what we need to do is to see how we can convert this demographic crisis to demographic dividend. The other findings, when you talk of human capital development, you're talking of two major issues. You're talking of education and skills, and you're talking of health and well-being. Unless you develop your education with appropriate skills to provide the economic bedrock of the economy, and you have able, healthy people, then you have challenges. In the context of our education, one of the key findings we made is that our education system, apart from other normal crises, is skewed towards knowledge content. The skills that is required to drive the economy is completely absent. And therefore, we need to do a lot to refocus our educational system to develop the necessary skills that we require in the country. On the health sector, we all know how the health sector is in terrible crisis. Issues of inadequate manpower, issues of equipment, and this is particularly at the rural areas. We've made efforts to address some of these key challenges in the rural areas, particularly relating to maternal health and infant mortality. But I think we still have a lot of challenges in that respect, and we must have to work towards that. Then, of course, there are issues relating to inconsistency in the implementation of our policies. We have the 2004 National Population Policy for Sustainable Development and the Strategic Plan of 2008. Almost 2 decades into that policy, we are yet to make any major breakthrough in achieving the policy targets. And there are several reasons for this, particularly the complete absence of monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to make sure that we achieve those targets. So these are some of the major findings we made, and appropriate recommendations were made to Mr. President to address these findings.
Thank you very much, Professor Shah. Let's bring in again Dr. Usman, whom we earlier introduced as Acting Director of Studies. Also, all right, so Dr. Usman, sorry, not Dr. Usman. All right, so Professor Shah, let's bring you in for this conversation. Sorry, I'm mixing up the names. Look, lead us more into the substance of your findings and recommendations. Because virtually, I mean, there's nothing that has been said so far that is not, if you like, in the public domain, which is not to diminish the value of your research findings. When you say we have a skills gap, what kind of skills did you identify as missing in our environment? And what also did you find in terms of the utility or the lack of it of the wide array of skill acquisition programs that you hear being launched in states, and then you have a number of centers and so on and so forth being opened all over the place? That's one. We have a skills gap, no question about it, and yet Nigerian professionals, particularly those in the health services sector, are emigrating ever so frequently. So what are we dealing with?
Much. The same concerns that you have raised were the same concerns that the study brought out forcefully, and Mr. President, listened to us, explain these problems. The educational system in Nigeria, like we all know, has a history, and that history is basically to tell the story that we have basically been producing people who would have knowledge, of issues. And so the point that Dr. Suman, has made, and also you have also made, is that we were not built in such a way as to develop skills of doing things, skills of producing, skills for manufacturing. And that's one big area that is missing. And so that finding, came out very, very clear. And what we recommended at that level is probably to look, is to ensure that we look at our curriculum, again at different levels. We're even suggesting that at the primary school level, we need to review the curriculum in such a way that at that lower level, the younger ones would continue, would start learning skills of doing things. In the past, those of us who went to the primary schools in the 50s and early 60s, there were little bits, of those skills acquisition subjects. We want this to come back. We want a review of the curriculum, at the secondary school level. Some few universities are beginning to think about this, and they have tweaked their curriculum to ensure that skills are embedded, in their own studies. And this is what we are telling the federal government. We know that the institutions in charge of curriculum development, ensuring that standards, are maintained, are also thinking about that. And we want the federal government, to put in place mechanisms to fast track this. Secondly, the point you've asked about skills acquisition programs around the country. Yes, there are. At both federal level and at also various state levels. We observed and we told Mr. President that yes, these skills acquisition programs are important. They are working in some states, but they're not working in some states. We made the point that the coverage, of this skills acquisition program is so limited, so that the funding that goes, to them it's not enough, to cover a wide range of youths that are expected to acquire these skills. So issues of funding, were raised. Issues of coordination, just like has been raised by Dr. Suman, is also there. So if we have a situation where these programs are coordinated, from the federal level to the state level, some local government levels, are also have developed their own skills acquisition programs. If we have this coordination, we have this understanding that we're all moving towards the same direction, wanting to achieve the same goals, I think that we would reap or would harvest more than what we are currently doing. So the point about the curriculum, we also pointed to Mr. President that, look, TVET, it's about technological education, that this has to be taken very seriously. The institutions that are available that are supposed to be training our young ones, in TVET, they are not doing very well. Because the TVET itself, we discovered, through the studies, of the institutions, that The young ones think that TVET education is for the weak students. So they would want to rather go and read banking or business administration, which they think can fetch them, So we want a situation whereby all our institutions, all our leaders, within those institutions, should play a very good role in making sure that this level of education, is brought to bear, and the nation, will be happy for it.
All right, thank you, Professor Shah. And my question will go to both of you. Anyone can take it. You talked about reviewing the school's curriculum. I do remember sometime, I think it was during the tenure of Professor Ubioma, who is now the Executive Secretary of NECO. A review of, the curriculum was also effected, and subjects like innovation, entrepreneurship, technology were added, to the subject list at the secondary school level. So I'm wondering, in what context did your recommendation focus in this review? And did you also consider that there could also be gap in the way we teach and the quality of those who teach the subjects?
Made the point, because when these reviews of curriculum are done, one basic problem would be those who are supposed to train. Many of them have not really been trained. Number two, the pedagogy, the way you teach, will be different from the way you want to teach people to acquire knowledge. And so the pedagogy would require that you need to have good laboratories, you need to have good workshops, you need to have good places where people can develop these skills and dispense these skills to the society where these skills are required, so that we can have the relationship between the classroom and the society where they can practice. Now, these are absent. So we have a reviewed curriculum, but the practice, is absent. And we are asking, Mr. President, that those institutions that are in those areas and that require to do the needful, should really try so that Nigerians would be happy for it. Training of technical teachers is absolutely important. And if we do not do this, in phases, if we don't budget, for this training, if we don't budget for the expansion of infrastructure in those institutions, then we would not go very, very far. So yes, I agree with you. Some level of changes or reforms, in the curriculum, has been done, but the implementation, has been the problem. Dr. Nazar.
Well, if I may add, just like you've mentioned, the last review on our curriculum, particularly with the basic and post-basic levels of our education, this was conducted by the National Education Resource Development Council, the body charged with the development of our curriculum at that level. They introduced about 34 different skills, which were expected to have implemented, particularly at the post-basic level. I can assure you, based on the research we've conducted at the National Institute, particularly with the basic public schools, most of these 34 trades that have been introduced, we neither have the teachers nor the equipment to teach them. So if you said a particular school takes fishery or carpentry or metalwork, you don't have the teachers to teach, you don't have the equipment to teach, you only examine the students based on theory. When they graduate, what do you expect? They're as good as beginners in that particular trade. So if you compare this, sometimes in 2017, the National Institute were in Brazil on a study tour, and we found a system, actually a system that is almost 100% funded by the private sector. They call the body Senai. As at that time, they've trained over 2 million Brazilian youth on skills. Children as young as 12, 14, they are introduced directly into TVET education. And you don't have to come out of that program looking for a job. In fact, you are a potential employer. So these are the kind of issues that we must look into. And one of the major radical recommendations we made to Mr. President is, look, we have the NYSC scheme after graduation. Probably is good for some other purposes, unity and some other issues. But if you want to really attack TVET education to provide the necessary skills, you have to go a bit more radical. And we recommended that after the basic education, that the secondary school, we should introduce 1 year compulsory TVET education before that student moves to tertiary education. So if we have those...
I was just wondering, Dr. Usman, we're sorry to interject. We're getting pressed for time. Both yourself and Professor Shah may take this question. I'm a bit curious when you say that we don't have the appropriate personnel for TVET skills. There are federal colleges of education, technical, in different parts of the country. There used to be one in Gombe, I believe. There's one at Akoka, that's opposite University of Lagos. What is happening? What did your study find with regard, for instance, to the institutions that are supposed to deliver technical education? Technical schools that are supposed to be under state governments, polytechnics that sometimes are even teaching liberal courses, and so on and so forth. And in addition to that, when you say skill acquisition, did you see the tension in these skill acquisition programs that appear to have been either floated and the centers built for political gains rather than actually delivering skills? You put people there for 2-3 months, they say they have learned tailoring, you give them sewing machines and the TV cameras will come and so on and so forth. In those days, when you hear that somebody is a London-trained tailor, you know how long it takes the person. Did we find, I mean, rather you now, did you find out this, in terms of your study and how we need to break it down? The Brazilian system is fine, but we already have a system here. Can we exhume it and reform it?
You are talking right on point. You see, one of the major issues we found out is this uncoordinated way we do things. And unfortunately, we put a lot of politics into serious national issues. You go and construct what is supposed to be a technical or vocational center. You didn't equip it, you didn't provide the necessary teaching skills, you just do it for political purposes. Now, what we need to do is, this issue of TVET, it cuts across all the 3 tiers of government if you look at our constitution. Now, we need, one of the major recommendations we made is the need to have a Human Capital Development Council at the national level, where we can have all these programs integrated and phase them out. What we have now is dissipation of resources at all levels of government without achieving nothing. Unfortunately, in this country, if you have the means and you are building a house now, when you come to finishing, you prefer to bring a Togolese or a Ghanaian to do your tiling or even your painting. That is terrible.
All right, we'll just have to leave it at that. Dr. Nasruddin Usman, Acting Director of Studies, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NEBS. Let me also appreciate Professor Dungpeng Shah, Director, Research, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NEBS. Both of you, would like to appreciate you for your contributions on Good Morning Nigeria today. Thank you. And so that's been Good Morning Nigeria this Friday. I am Claire Dilabo Abdurazak. From me and the rest of the production crew, we're wishing you a pleasant weekend and asking you to join us again on Monday.
I'm Kingsley Osadola. Don't forget, take personal responsibility. COVID-19 is back and the numbers are climbing. Enjoy your weekend and stay safe.
This is the network service of the NTA.